to BoardGameCast. My name is Jesper Edmark, also known as Mordachai on BoardGameGeek, and I am very excited to give you an episode of Power Grid. This will be episode 5 in my series, and Power Grid is really one of my all-time favorites. Funkenschlag, as it originally is called, is made by Friedman Friese, and I have been playing this for a long time and quite a few times as well. Only Race for the Galaxy has really been played more by me than this game, so I feel that I should be able to give you some pretty good insights onto the way the game is played. First of all, I would say that this is a 4-man game, and it was played at DMF in Lund. And the players here will be from the left, Christian. On the top left will be Daniel, on the top right will be Victor, and I am sitting on the right. This game is an oddball in my collection. It has quite a lot of randomness with the drawing of the plants, but even though I normally do not like that, I don't like random elements in the games, this is something that I have no problem with. Playing the odds in this is quite interesting, and there are actually several small games inside the overall game of Funkenschlag. I will, by the way, call it Funken for the rest of this, mainly because the English title does start with an F, and that seems odd for me considering it's a Friedman Friese game. But enough of that. One of the smaller games in Funken is playing turn order, and turn order is highly important considering that the rubber band effect in this game is quite prevalent. You are really forced to see where in turn order you will be if you connect more cities, and that is a really interesting aspect, I think. You will see that both me and Christian, who has both played this game quite a few times, will play the turn order game a lot during this session. Both Victor and Daniel are not as experienced at this game. Daniel actually played it for the first time, and they are not as conservative regarding turn order as us more experienced players are. On the other hand, you have to know when the right time is to go further up in the turn order, and you will see examples of that as well. This session will be played on the French map, and the France side has some changes to the basic rules. There are more uranium at the start of the game than normal. Instead of starting at 12, it starts at 5, and the rest of the setup is the same as usual, and the supply of resources are the same as usual as well. So it is quite an interesting map because you have more availability to the nuclear plants. Now the 13th plant is actually removed from the game and replaced by the 11. So the 11 will always be the first plant that enters the future market when a plant is bought in round 1. So uranium and the nuclear plants are a little bit better on this map than on the regular United States map or the German map. Other than that, it's a very well balanced map. The connection costs are fairly even. They are not as cheap as the east side of the United States map, and it's not as expensive as most of the connections in the German map. So it's a well-rounded map, and it doesn't have that imbalance that the United States map has. There are a jump cost from the north side to the south side, but it's not as high as the one in the United States map. So I like this map, and I like the changes to the resources. As we start this game, you see that we have taken away the light brown area, that is the sheep northern area of France, and we have taken the medium cost yellow area away. And as we go into the first bidding, you see the graphics I have chosen for this session. I worked quite a lot of the graphics here, so I hope you like it. I hope it's clear of who is bidding what, since you will not be able to hear the actual bids. And on that note, I have decided that I will leave the bidding without cuts. Other than that, I have cut a lot of the material away. The game was originally 2 hours and 10 minutes. That is quite long for a 4-player Funken game, but you will soon realize why. And I have cut out about 70 minutes of that, so that we end up with about 1 hour of footage left. There will be a later case where I have had to reconstruct the events. I lost some footage, but that will be explained later. What you saw here in the early bidding was that the 5th plant, or plant number 5, was picked up first for the cost of 7, and it's a quite normal pickup, and not usually the plant that are bid out or put up for auction first, but that was what happened here. And then I bid up the 4 to 7 and got that one, and then with the 8 up in the current market, that was picked up, and 9 getting in there, and that was picked up as well. Now there has been a lot of theory crafting of the first round, how you should bid here and what plans are worth what in Funken, and I'm not going to go into full detail, but basically none of the purchases that we made were that out of the ordinary. The only thing that might have been a risky move here was picking up the 8 when both the 4 and the 5 had been bought already, but it's also up for debate. You could go for the 8 gambit and just simply only build 1 city or no cities to go first in the next round. That is always a possibility, but nothing out of the ordinary. What then happens is that all the players except Christian pick 2 cities at the start. I started here by picking 2 cities in the southern part of the France map here, and I enclosed an area of 4 cities. The reason I used 2 cities instead of 1 was simply to make it less attractive for someone to go in behind me. Christian still thought about it, but decided it was probably better to go outside of me. With Victor, the green player here, going in the middle of the map, and with Daniel going into Paris, there was not much room for Christian to go in the northern part, so he really only could compete with me. there's another point that to be made here. Two of the players here actually built more cities than they could provide with energy, and that is a risk. You lose turn order in order to gain a better map position. Going light, as Matt Albritton of BoardGameGeek, his name is Kubigaruma, there has he calls it going light, and it's usually not a good idea, but early game it might be. That has also been theory crafted about a lot. And on the note of BoardGameGeek and Funken, there are, besides Kubigaruma, I would like to point out that there is a really good personality on Funken that he has done a thread that is called How to Lose at Power Grid. I really can recommend. His name is Paul Harrington. Unfortunately, he has not been active for a while now on BoardGameGeek, but I really recommend that thread. The reason I mentioned Kubigaruma is because the last time I checked, he had about 900 games of Funken logged, and that is quite a few more games than I have. So he is one of the most experienced gamers of this game that I know of. He has made a lot of good strategic threads or forum posts on BoardGameGeek, so I recommend that you check them out as well. Here in the second round, there was not much happening, and the game that was about to happen here was laid to bare in the second round. You see that after 2 rounds here of purchasing plants, we have the 3, 6, 7 and 14 still in the current market, and on the future market we have the 15, 17, 20 and the 32 that will eventually go into the bottom under the Stufe 3 plant marker. But this shows me that it will be a tight game. The resources will be expensive this game, and you can see that because there are quite bad plants out on the market, both the current and the future one. So it will be an expensive, drawn out game, and that will be shown to you as we go further. So after second round here, you see that we have still not made very much advancements on the board or the plants. We have still very low capacity, and no one really got the opportunity to jump in capacity early game. That is normally the case in this game, and the reason why you want to stay back in turn order. But in this case, there was no reason to stay back in turn order and pass during the plants auctioning, because the plants that was coming up, we knew that there were no good plants coming up to the current market. So the only reason to stay back in turn order was to get cheaper resources. And that is quite interesting. You usually do not see the resource game, the game within the game, being played this early. It usually comes into play round 3, 4 maybe, but already from the second round forward we have an incentive to go later in the turn, to get late turn order. Not because you think that you will be getting better plants, but because it will be expensive to buy those resources if you go earlier in turn order or higher in the turn order. So already here you see that we are careful with how many buildings we build, and although all players went up to 3 connected cities in this turn, that was really the last turn that we stayed in the same spot. You'll soon notice why. And as you see here, I have chosen to make a count of the expenses of income on each turn, and I hope that if you miss something you can go back to that and see what happened. Another thing that's interesting with that is that you will see that the amount of money the players have on hand will differ quite a bit over the course of the game. For instance, Victor, the green player here, most of the game he had the least amount of money. He had very little money left at the end of each round for most of the game, but in the end he shot up and had the most money of us all for the last few rounds, and that is basically because he jumped up and took a lead in income, but also because he had a period in the mid-late game where he had the most efficient buildings of us all, and so it can really mix up who is having the cash lead and who is in the bottom. But in the end it's the one that can provide the most cities with energy that wins, and it doesn't matter how much money you have on hand except for tiebreaker. So if you have 200 electro on hand but only provide energy to 6 cities, you will still lose out to those who have 0 money on hand but provide energy to 17 cities. So I'm guessing that was a bit extreme, but you get the gist of it. What is happening here is that we really suffer under the non-availability of good plants. There are really no reason for any of us, with the exception of Daniel, the red player, to buy any plants here, because it will not help us going forward into the game. We really need better plants than the ones that provide 1 or 2 cities with energy here, because it will be so expensive to buy the resources for them, so we basically won't gain any money when we fire them up at the administration phase of the game. The exception to this, as I said, is Daniel. He had purchased the 15. He were going first. The next turn he would be highest in the turn order no matter what he did, and the only thing he could do to mitigate that position was to make sure that he had an income boost, as well as you see here he's stockpiling resources. So he goes ahead and buys a lot of resources. He purchases the otherwise quite bad power plant number 3, simply because that will make it possible for him to build an extra city and get an income lead over the rest of us. So we buy our resources, and as you see, the coal especially is getting very expensive for being this early in the game. And that is something that will keep happen for the rest of the game. The coal will get more and more expensive, and that is one reason for the players to try and hold back from the coal plants. But then again, the only big plants to come up on the horizon here on the future market is ones that need coal. So it's a difficult decision to make, but still the 4 is running if I choose to run it. In this case I did not choose to run it because I would lose money running it. The 15 is running, the 10 is running, the 5 is still running with coal if Victor so chooses. The 12, the hybrid plant, is running with coal if Christian chooses to do so. So, and the 8 is still in the game, so it's looking like coal will be very expensive at this point. So we went through the motions here, and I had no choice. I had to pick up a plant. As I said, I could not stay with the 4, providing one of my cities with coal energy here, because I basically lost money for that. So I needed something else. And if you looked carefully, you saw that I actually only powered 2 of my 3 cities the last round, but simply because running the 4 was too expensive. So I tried to mix it up. I tried to go into an alternate source of energy, in this case the garbage, and although garbage isn't that cheap, it's still better than coal by far. So I'm quite happy with being able to be the only one that buy coal here, buy garbage here. I still bought coal, as you saw, and that was because I noticed that the 20 and 21 plants were the most likely plants to come up and be available for the upcoming round. And I felt that if I want to have an endgame plant, 20 might work, and if I don't get the 20, I have a good chance of getting the 21, and that can still burn coal. So that looked like a possibility to me. So I picked up the coal, making it a bit more expensive for the coal using players, and in worst case scenario I could use it to go ±1 on by using it on the 4, and that would be that. So I made a gamble and picked up the 4 without the intention to using it immediately. And here we have the first plant that's really built up in the game. The 20 is one dangerous power plant, and in this game especially so, because the coal was already expensive. There were a lot of plants out on the board that used coal or could use coal. So the 20 is a very dangerous proposition here. I felt that I had already bought a couple of coal and I would be guaranteed to buy a few more this round. So I thought that I can buy it now and I will be able to fire it up once or twice in the upcoming turns, and then maybe save it for later, depending on the other plants that come into play, and then use it again in the late game. But Daniel had other plans, so he bid me up, and I had a really hard time deciding on how much this was really worth. I did not actually think that it would become that contested. So I bid it up a little bit more, and suddenly it's bids over 30. And this can be a very good price for the 20. It can also be an extremely high price for the 20. It all depends on the situation. In this case, it's hard to say, and Matt or Paul could probably articulate it better than me, but in this case it is still a gamble. I think that buying it for this price and it ends up costing 34 is if you can utilize it in the correct way, it will definitely have been worth it, considering the other plants on the market that they provide so few cities with energy. So if you can use it in the correct way, it is a very good price. But if it suddenly becomes an influx of very good plants on the market, it's not that great. And if we continue burning that coal away, it also will be a liability in the end. So I go with my plan here. I bid up the 21, now that the 20 did not go my way. And it's actually Victor who put it up for auction, but I bid it up. But this as well goes way beyond what I was prepared to buy it for. I did not think that it will go for so high. So that was a miscalculation on my part as well, but at least I bid up Victor on this. So I'm left with no choice. I cannot take the 22 and risk the 25 coming into play and given to Christian. That is not an acceptable proposition, I think. That would provide him with such a boost that it would be difficult for me to catch up to him after that. So I asked sigh and pass out from the auction phase and decide to stay with my 4, potentially 5 cities. So we continue building our resource banks, and here Daniel is put at a dilemma. He can fire up the 25 now, or the 20 now, but he will not be able to burn it every round with the current situation on the resource market. Still, if you can keep only powering up the 20 and stay ahead of the income game, that it's still a possibility, but as I said, it is a gamble. So we build cities, and you see here that the 20 has one little advantage in this case over the 21, because it's of a lower base value. So there was really no reason for Victor here to go to 5, because that would not gain him anything, and he really did not want to stay on 4, because that would mean he did not utilize his wind plant. So he went to 6, and at the same time both Christian and me stayed at 4. So we are behind here in income, simply because we cannot build up without running the risk of either losing turn order and the potential of better plans, or in my case I cannot really gain much from building up to 5, because the 4 still doesn't provide me with a profit. So I'm still saving the coal on the 4 for the 25 perhaps. That was my plan, at least. So we go into the 7th round, and Victor realizes that there is no plant on the market that can provide me with any benefit. I have the 21, I have the 18. That is, I'm just gonna stay here and be happy with my 6 cities, or potential 8 if he decides to burn the 10 as well. And I'm left with no choice. I have to buy a plant again. This turn I did not give Christian any benefit. Last time he got the 22 at cost, but this time I was last in turn order, and I picked up the 16. It's not a bad plant when the oil is cheaper than the coal, like it were here. And I could stockpile it for a couple rounds ahead, especially if I buy a big power plant here next turn and maybe get ahead in turn order. I I can be a little bit safer if I buy the extra coal now. Stockpiling or not stockpiling, that is one big question in this game, and it all depends on the situation. At times it is definitely worth it to stockpile. If you plan on building more city connections and going over the others in turn order, stockpiling can save you a lot of money. At the same time, sometimes it will waste money that you would need to build cities, so it's a dangerous game to play. What happened here was that Victor decided to not run the stall into phase 2. Instead, he decided to take an income boost and go up to 8 cities. I'm not entirely sure that was the correct choice. He was the most efficient here, and he provided energy to 6 cities, so he could have stayed on that, and I think he would have gained money on the rest of us if he had done that. Then again, it would have given the rest of us possibility of catching up in plans and maybe become more efficient than him. He could potentially have been deprived of a couple of the very cheap cities, but I'm not sure. Neither choice was a bad one, so maybe 50-50, maybe 60-40 in my head, leaning towards keeping the stall active for at least one turn. I don't know, but never mind. He decided to push us into phase 2. So the 6 and the 7 plans have been made obsolete here in a couple of turns, and the 17 was made obsolete when we went into phase 2. But other than that, all the rest of the plans have actually been purchased at this point, so we purchased a lot of plants this game. It comes my turn here, and I bid out the 25, and I do so thinking that most likely Christian do not want to bid against me. The 25 can also be an endgame plant. Yes, the coal is expensive, but I already have 2 coal stockpiled, and the potential 31 will come up to the current market, and 31 is definitely an endgame plant. But my reasoning is that the coal will be expensive. The 31 will not be that such boost of Christian's position here, so I can give him that if I get an endgame plant as well. I can also help push the coal into more expensive position if that happens. But what happens instead is that the 29 pops up, and that is the one that goes to the current market, and 29 is one superb plant. That is not a bad plant at all, but in this case the 28 will become the better choice. It's a lower base cost, and it costs actually less to fuel than the 29 in this situation. It is not an endgame plant. It only provides 4 cities, the same as 29, but it is an efficient plant, and that is what really counts here. So Christian, for just a few electro, he can provide 6 cities with energy here. So he's really happy with that. My 11 is not as good anymore. It's cheap to run, but it only provides 1 city. So I'm looking to replace this as soon as possible. Victor's situation is that he's quite happy. He can provide 8 cities. He still is looking for a better plant next turn to replace his now lowly 10 plant, especially since the coal is so expensive. And for Daniel, the situation is that he is still quite bound to coal, but at least he has gone into one alternate fuel source with a garbage here. And I actually dispensed of my garbage plant instead of the 4 the turn before, and that was also one thing that is noteworthy because I wanted to save the coal, and I felt that at least one plant that can use the coal will come. So instead of throwing away the 4 and the 2 coals, I threw away my garbage plant, and that is the reason that the 24 here for Daniel is actually a good investment. So we're going to turn 9, and Daniel is looking for efficient plants, so he's bidding up the 29. But he won't have it cheaply, so Victor really does provide him with a challenge, and in the end he has to pass and let it go. I think that was something that he was sad about, because now he's more or less forced going into more coal, especially since we hit the Stufe 3 or step 3 here, because the only 2 plants that are endgame plants in the current market now are the coal plants. So he really has no choice. Well, he could hang back and hope that something better came up to the market, but there was not much of a hope there. I'm definitely not bidding on the 36 here. I have the 25. I'm planning to keep that one. I'm not going into more coal. And Christian is faced with a dilemma of, should he let the 36 plant go at cost? It is a good plant, but it's an expensive plant to run. He's still in need of an endgame plant. He has none here. So he knows that he has to get one good plant this turn to be able to compete and be ready for the last turn, to have enough efficiency or enough he could provide enough cities with electricity. So we need an endgame plant here. So he thinks about it, and he's calculating a lot here, and it's not only calculating how much can I bid, it's also how much can I bid without starving myself from being able to build the resources and cities. And considering it takes 3 coal to provide the 36 with the fuel necessary, that is getting to be one expensive affair now. He decides to bid against Daniel. He can't let it go for 36, and I think I actually believe that Daniel would let it go here. There were still a possibility of something good popping up, but Daniel was adamant. If he was going into coal, he was going into coal, and he would not settle for the 31. This is where the game starts to go wrong for Daniel, really, because he is now bound to coal. Doesn't matter that he was bid up on the plant as much as the fact that he is bound to coal. He's gonna spend a lot of money on coal for the rest of the game. Now, as you saw on the screen here, we actually do this phase transition wrong, or we actually haven't come to the transition yet, but the replacing of the plants. And this is a question that has been answered in the FAQ on BoardGameGeek, in the official FAQ actually. But it had been a while since I played this last, and Christian was adamant that this was the correct way to play the game, and I didn't want to argue here, but I checked it up afterwards, and actually we should replace the plants, keeping the Stufe 3 card as the highest plant. So what actually should have happened is that 2 plants should have come up before it was my turn to purchase. It wouldn't have changed anything up until that point. I would still not have bid against Christian on the 31, but it would have prevented me from getting the 38 actually. I would have gotten the 35 instead, and that would probably have changed the game quite a bit, I think, because I was able to run the 38 for the rest of the game very cheaply. So that was something that look out for. If that happens, you still draw new plants, and you don't do the step 3 changes until after the bidding is complete. But what happened here was that there are now 6 plants. We are in step 3. There are 6 plants available, all in the current market, and they are all providing 5 cities or less with energy. So not only did we have very low plants available at the early game, we also put some quite bad endgame plants below the step 3 cards, the Stufe 3 card. So you see me stockpiling resources, and you see Christian stockpiling resources, and this is where Daniel really gets shut out of competing for the victory here, because he can only fire up his 24 this round. He simply has no resources for his coal plants, so instead of getting an income of around 100, he only gets 54 here, and that is quite a lot of money in the end. So we build up our cities. We see if we can get any cheap connections here. But we still play the turn order game, making sure that we are staying behind as much as possible. When we come into step 3 here, we are really at the end game. There now is a possibility to have 3 companies established in each city, but it's still cost prohibitive going from the south to the north or vice versa. So we still have the map pretty much divided between the red and green side and the white and blue side, at this point at least. But as you see, we will soon encroach upon those area restrictions. So with only a couple of rounds to go here, there are quite difference of the readiness for the end game. I have my end game plans already purchased, bar 5 capacity 1. Christian is behind here. He has only a capacity of 12, although if he buys a plant that provides 7 cities with energy, he will go up to 17. Daniel is in a situation where if he can get coal, he is more or less ready for the last turn. That is a big if. And Victor is looking behind here. he has quite a low capacity. But then again, he has quite a lot of money. So that is something to look out for when you play this game. It might be a bad idea to run your efficient plants for too long, or in this case buy too many plants that are an improvement but only in efficiency and not in capacity, because it might put you in a bind for the late game here. But as you see, it is a rather close game besides that point. So we go into bidding here, and what is bid up is the 40. I'm looking to replace my 16 to get that end game capacity of 17 or more. And if I would have gotten the 40 here, I would have gone up to 18 capacity, which would have given me the chance to maybe just run the game home with 18 cities when the others can provide the most 17. But that is always a gamble as well. So when nothing good comes up, I'm not prepared to bid for a 32. That's quite a lot of oil, so I don't think I can provide it that cheaply. I decided to go for a 35 instead. The 35 would provide me with enough capacity at a much cheaper cost. And then we took a small bio break. And what happened was that I forgot to turn on the camera, or rather I was checking the camera settings and then didn't realize I couldn't start the camera from that position. So I thought that I was filming here, but I actually wasn't. So this is a reconstruction I made afterwards, and I hope you won't suffer too much from it. I think for a while, and then I bid out the 44 instead of the available 50, thinking that, well, it doesn't look like I'm gonna need 18 after all, and I might not actually be able to build 18 cities. So I go with a cheaper wind plant instead. It's only 6 electro, but it's not only 6 electro, it's also position. And again we come to turn order position. If someone buys the 50, or I know that their 46 is in the deck as well, I will have a little benefit over them if we are on the same amount of cities. And as you saw, Christian indeed bought the 50 here. He was scrambling for those 17 capacity combinations. So at this point he is at 16. So that is what he does. I forgot to replace the plant here, but it should have already been visible, but the plant deck is empty after that. So we buy our resources, and as you see, I decided to get extra coal to be absolutely 100% sure that I would be able to fire it up next turn. That probably was going to be the last turn. And then we build cities. So now we start going north, the two of us that started in the south, and the northern players start to go south here. So we meet somewhere in the middle. and then we fire our plants. And two very important things is to note here. Christian decides not to fire up his 31. He loses a few electro, but he's guaranteed to have the 31 fueled the last turn. And in step 3, only 4 coal is provided each turn, so at that he's certainly ran the risk of not having coal. Daniel did that as well. He was not keen on risking not having coal in the last turn. He had already suffered enough from lack of coal earlier in the game. That is also because with the other plants and not building past 9 cities, he could actually provide his cities with energy without firing up his big plant. So that was forethought on his part. Last turn, and Victor is forced to purchase one last plant. So he goes with the only one that gives him 17 capacity, the 46. It's an expensive plant, but he got it at cost. No one else wanted to buy a plant. So it was not that expensive, and considering that he can use oil for it instead of coal, it's quite safe for him as well. It's what he needed to be able to build out here in the end. And we bought our last set of resources. I bought my 3 garbage. Daniel bought his garbage and oil. Victor went with oil across the board, and Christian bought his uranium for 1 electro the last turn. So that was what was very cheap for him. But at this point, if the game ends now, he cannot win, because he can only provide 16 cities with electricity. So then we build our cities, and Daniel basically fills up the north here with as many sheep buildings or cities as he can find. He ended up with spending the least money on cities, but then again he only bought 15 of them, or bought the rights to provide 15 of them with energy. So I go second here, and I just find the 4 cheapest building I can and build out to 17. So Christian follows and builds his cities here, and he had the money for 17 cities, but he didn't have the capacity, so he stopped at 16. And finally Victor builds out and manages to go to 17 cities as well. And I'm thinking here that Victor probably won, since he managed to get to 17 cities, because I'm sitting on a measly 6 electro after building. But as it turns out, it would become a very close game. Closer than I thought it would be. Because after building to 17, Victor is not sitting on much money either. In fact, he's only sitting at 2 electro. And that is the end conditions met of the game, 17 cities. And as you see, I end up winning this with a measly 4 electro after this drawn out game with low plant availability. and we bought a lot of plants this game. 4 of the players actually bought 7 plants each this game, and that is quite a lot. Only Christian bought 6 plants. Usually if you buy 7 plants you will not be able to contend for the win. In normal games you usually replace 2 or 3 plants, and in extreme cases you can get away with replacing only 1 plant. So replacing 4 plants as we did this game, that is quite extreme on the other end. But either way, it was a long game. It was a very expensive game, looking at the expenditures for both plants and resources. Not many plants were contested. Some of them were bid up a lot though, so that was quite interesting as well to see. The one spending most money on plants and resources was Victor, and he made up for that by being the one who had gained the most income over the game by quite a lot. I might add, he had 54 more income than I did. I was second place there, so that is a quite big difference. But and he also spent the least on cities between the two of us. So the money difference between us, that was because I had been more efficient with plant costs and resource costs. But in the end it was a really close game, and we had a lot of fun. I hope that you have had fun as well. I would like to give you one last tip before I end here, and that is I used the original money in the box just to show you how the game looks here. But if you can, I really recommend replacing that with poker chips or something of the kind, because it makes the game speed up and it makes it much less of a risk to shortchange yourself or someone else. It's annoying when you end up with 1 or 2 more or fewer electro than you actually should have had, and that the risk is much less when you use poker chips, and usually easier to count as well. So that is my last tip here. In the end, Funkenschlag, Friedman Friese, my probably all-time favorite game. I hope you enjoyed this session, and I hope that you will join me next time. And until then, I bid you farewell. Bye bye.